This may be the last recorded message of the human race. As far as I know, I haven't seen another living person post anything online in years. I'm pretty sure everyone is either dead or no longer human. I tried to save my family. I truly did. But I couldn't reach them in time. I couldn't reach anyone. There was no time. I don't even know how I managed to escape without being turned, without becoming one of them. I suppose I should explain what happened. It started when scientists discovered ancient bacteria, viruses, and fungi thawing in the Antarctica. Pathogens that had just been sealed away for over 50,000 years and were suddenly loose upon the world. Some people contracted variations of the plague. Others suffered respiratory infections that rotted their lungs from the inside out. But then there were those who became infected with C. magnificus, the oldest known species of cordyceps. The infected weren't mindless, ravenous monsters, no. This wasn't some cliché zombie outbreak. No, this was way worse. When a person contracts C. magnificus, their pupils expand until their eyes are nothing but deep, black voids. Empty. Inhuman. They no longer speak, at least not in words. Instead, they click. Their cheek muscles stretch impossibly tight. Locking them in a grotesque, permanent grin. Their gums turn a sickly pale pink-white, and their teeth gradually yellow, as if their body is slowly surrendering to decay while keeping them alive. But the worst part, they aren't violent. They're calculated. They do whatever it takes to spread their infection, and the way they do it, it broke whatever hope I had left for humanity. What the fuck do they do? It wasn't just through biting or airborne spores. No, they spread it through fluids. They took it over by infiltrating, violating, and consuming. They used human bodies like breeding grounds, like incubators, until they had been fully drained of life, until the fruiting bodies burst free, ready to be devoured by the animals of the nature. Ready to be devoured by the animals of Earth. I saw it happen. I was hiding in an old motel when a woman stumbled into the parking lot, gasping for help. I almost ran to her, almost. But then I saw them, 3 of them, standing in the open, watching. Their black eyes locked on her as she screamed, but they didn't chase her, they just waited. She collapsed, and one of them finally moved. Slow, deliberate steps, its grin unwavering. It knelt beside her, caressed her face with fingers that had started to sprout something. Thin, pale tendrils curling from beneath the nails. She was too weak to fight when its mouth met hers. I knew what it was doing. Spreading. Seeding. By the time she stopped struggling, the others had already started to peel her clothes away. I turned and ran before I could see what happened next. But I heard it. The wet sounds, the gasping, the clicking, the laughter. If you could even call it that. A hollow, buzzing noise like something vibrating inside their throats. I didn't sleep that night. I don't really sleep at all anymore. Every time I close my eyes, I see them in the darkness, smiling, clicking, waiting, a cleansing, the planet's way of fighting back, of erasing the disease that was humanity. I always saw us as a cancer to the world. Maybe this was inevitable. Maybe Earth was always going to release its white blood cells and wipe us out. Maybe this was inevitable. Maybe Earth was always going to release its white blood cells and wipe us out. But I don't want to live in this world anymore. I've been drifting on this ship for too long. I see the shore now. but I know what waits for me there. It's time to accept my fate. If anyone, anything, finds this transmission or my journal, know this: the earth does not take kindly to abuse. Farewell. I live in a 5-story apartment complex, and my bathroom has an odd setup. One mirror faces another, creating an infinity effect. One of those mirrors is part of the medicine cabinet. When you look into one, the reflections seem to stretch endlessly, like they're pulling you into some otherworldly void. I've lived here for almost 2 years now, just me and my daughter, and those mirrors have always made me feel uneasy. There's this strange, almost unreal sensation when I look into them, like I'm slipping out of reality. Maybe it's a kind of depersonalization, but whatever it is, it's unsettling. When I stare too long, it stops feeling like I'm looking at my own reflection. Instead, it feels like someone else is staring back at me, someone who knows far too much about me. It gives me the creeps. This morning, something felt especially off. As I moved my head slightly, I noticed that one of the reflections, about the 9th one back, was delayed. It didn't move in sync with the others. For a split second, it just stood there, watching. Before catching up, I brushed it off. Sleep deprivation can play tricks on your mind, and having a newborn means I'm running out of fumes most of the time. That night, after putting my daughter back to bed for the 3rd time, I went to the bathroom again. It happened again. But this time, the delay was closer, around the 5th reflection. It was more noticeable. My stomach dropped, and a cold wave of fear washed over me. I realized I've always felt uneasy around mirrors, though I never gave it much thought before. I remembered a time years ago when I was tripping and stared into a mirror for what felt like hours. Ever since then, I haven't been the same. Mirrors don't feel like mere glass to me. They feel like doorways, and whatever's on the other side, I don't want to know. The next night was quiet until 3 a.m. I woke up to feed my daughter. After putting her back to bed, I headed to the bathroom. That's when I heard it. A low, hollow thump from behind the medicine cabinet. The sound made me freeze. My heart started pounding, and before I could talk myself out of it, I swung the mirror open. What I saw wasn't the shelf of medicines I was expecting. There was no shelf. Instead, there was a gaping dark hole, there was no shelf. Instead, there was a gaping dark hole that seemed to stretch back endlessly, and standing in the center of the void was a figure. It looked just like me. No, not exactly like me. Its features were unnaturally smooth, like it had been carved from porcelain. Its eyes were pitch black, deep, empty voids that seemed to swallow the dim bathroom light. It tilted its head, and the movement were accompanied by a sharp clicking sound, like bones snapping into place. I slammed the cabinet shut so hard the mirror cracked. My hands were shaking as I ran down the hall to my daughter's room. But when I opened the door, the crib was empty. She was gone. Panic took over. My mind raced as I ran from room to room. Then I heard it. A sound that stopped me cold. Crying. It was coming from the living room. I bolted down the stairs and found her lying on the couch. But something was wrong. As I stepped closer, I realized it wasn't her. It looked like her, but something was off. Her movements were stiff, unnatural. The crying stopped abruptly as she turned to look at me. Her wide eyes glistened in the dim light. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then she smiled, a slow, deliberate grin that sent chills down my spine. I backed away, trembling, and before I could think of what to do, I blacked out. The next morning, everything seemed normal again. My daughter was in her crib, cooing like nothing had happened. But there's one thing I can't shake. She's developed a strange fascination with mirrors. She stares at them for hours, giggling and reaching out, like she's playing with someone or something only she can see. I wasn't a private detective, yet here I was, taking on a private job for someone, a coward, a friend. The news came from the chief, who told me that a young woman named Lisa had personally requested my help, claiming she trusted me more than anyone, that and the fact that I was a cop. At first, I was skeptical about who Lisa was, but then I remembered. Our class representative from high school, and now she had a job for me. More specifically, a job where I was supposed to help. She told me to meet her outside the cafe Moonlight next Sunday. For 4 days, I tried to contact her, but the only thing she ever said was, "Information will be given once we meet in person," and nothing illegal. Convenient timing, the day I was supposed to meet Lisa happened to be the Memorial Day for my late grandfather. Moonlight was located just outside the cemetery, so after paying my respects to my granddad, I crossed the street and entered the cafe. I arrived at 6 p.m. since it was evening. The place wasn't too crowded. Lisa showed up at 7. She wore a hoodie despite it being summer, which made me assume this job would take place outside at night. The fact that she chose a cafe as her meeting spot also suggested she needed caffeine, probably a job that ran into the late hours. I figured I could spare time until midnight since my shift started at 9 a.m. We sat down, drank coffee, and talked about life until 8. That's when Lisa stood up and said she was ready to show me what the job was. I had no idea what to expect, maybe something strength-related, but where she led me was the graveyard, in the middle of the night. At that point, I was convinced this was some kind of practical joke. She stopped in front of one particular gravestone. One I immediately knew was significant. It was massive, easily twice the size of the others in both height and width, adorned with intricate details. If I had to describe it briefly, I'd say it looked like a small fortress. As agreed, I was allowed to leave at midnight, but Lisa was staying until 5 a.m. Our job was simple: to watch over the large tomb. The layout of the grave was unusual. It had 3 pedestals with a small crucifix perched on top of the tallest one, easily double my height. A fence surrounded the entire gravesite, making it stand out even more. The grave belonged to someone named Alice. No surname, no date of death, no epitaph, just Grave of Alice. I guessed she had some kind of noblewoman who spent her final days building her own resting place. The lack of additional information made me wonder if this was actually a family mausoleum. "All we have to do is watch this part of the grave," Lisa said, pointing to the back of the stone. But she wasn't pointing at just any part of the grave. There was something I didn't expect to see. A door. Not just a carving of one, an actual door complete with a doorknob. Interesting. Maybe it was meant for family members to access the tomb. If that were the case, then this really might be a mausoleum. Of course, our job was just to watch, not open it. Not that we could, the door was locked. As time passed, any lingering sense of unease I had, not that I had much to begin with, was slowly replaced by sheer boredom. "Who hired you for this job?" I asked, breaking the silence. "City Council," she replied. "So you're some kind of council agent?" "Actually, I'm a university student. Saw the flyer on a billboard. The council offered $40 an hour, and I took the job." "And how are you handling your sleep schedule?" Lisa took a sip of coffee before answering. "My lectures start at 1 p.m., so I can sleep until then. Don't worry about me, Alex. I'm a practical person." She was. That's what people called her back in high school. Practical Lisa. A grandmaster of time management. Always arriving on time, leaving on time. Homework and assignments finished early. Never rushed. Always top grades. The clock read 9:20 p.m. 2 hours and 40 minutes to go. We had already spent an hour and 20 minutes in the cemetery, yet it felt like mere minutes.
I leaned back and stared at the tombstone, wondering who was buried there. Then, a sound. Something fell from the sky, hit the stone, and dropped on the ground. I jerked up. Lisa flinched at the noise. Then, again. Another black object struck the grave. We both looked down at the entrance of the tomb. 2 blackbirds lay there, bloody, motionless, dead. I barely had time to process it before another thud sounded. A third bird dropped. 3 dead birds. I froze. My mind scrambled for an explanation. Lisa, silent beside me, was likely thinking the same thing. I crouched down and picked up the corpses. I wasn't sure why, maybe out of respect for the burial ground. As I passed the door of the grave, a wave of nausea hit me. The smell. Lisa noticed my reaction and stepped forward, only to gag as well. The door, that particular part of the grave, reeked of rot, of filth, of something foul. Lisa dropped to her knees, retching. Instinct kicked in. I grabbed her arm and dragged her away from the doorway. Strangely, the second we stepped back into the open air, the smell vanished. "You okay?" I asked. "Just get rid of the birds," she muttered. I did as she asked, dumping the bodies in a trash bin before returning to my seat. I checked the time again. 2 more hours to go. I leaned against a tree, exhaustion creeping up on me. A strange omen, falling asleep in the middle of a graveyard. Not exactly a good sign, but my mind kept drifting back to the blackbirds. Not the Beatles song, the real ones. The ones that fell from the sky and died. What was all that about? At some point I must have dozed off, though not completely. I could still hear the wind, the ambient night sounds, and Lisa muttering to herself, "What the fuck am I doing? What the fuck am I doing?" I opened my eyes and glanced at her. She was looking something up on her phone, probably searching for information on Alice, just as I was about to suggest. We found nothing. Every search result led to people from different places that shared our town's name. The only Alice I came across was Alice Hill, a policewoman from another precinct, definitely not our Alice. In fact, she had just liked a post about a Domino's weekend deal. Yeah, not the Alice we're looking for. Another hour passed. Only 30 minutes left before I could head home. Then thunder rumbled in the distance. As I packed my bag, I noticed something odd. A part of it was tangled in the branches on the ground. That was the logical explanation. But from my perspective, it felt like the ground itself had swallowed my bag strap, like it was pulling me in. I yanked hard, and when it finally came loose, I stumbled back, right as lightning struck the tree I had been resting against. The next thing I knew, I was on the ground, screaming. Embers burned into my back. Pain. Confusion. Lisa's voice cut through the haze. "Are you okay?" I nodded. I wasn't okay. I needed to leave. Lisa refused. She was getting paid after all. We argued. In the end, I left her behind. The burn marks from embers in the thunderstorm had washed away by the time I arrived home. One stroke of luck was that I managed to leave the tree in time. The burns still stung, and with exhaustion and injury weighing on me, I barely made it to my bed before darkness consumed me. In my dreams, I found myself back at the cemetery, alone this time. In the morning, I wandered through the graves until I reached the one I had guarded the night before, the one with a door. As I approached from the side where the door was, it slowly creaked open. Emerging from within were 2 figures, Lisa and me, but not as we were. They were rotting, crawling with maggots, resurrected corpses from years past. I jolted awake, gasping for air. What a nightmare. At least I had slept enough to heal physically. Mentally, I wasn't so sure. I dressed, got in my car, and drove to the station. On the way, I checked in with Lisa. She told me she had gone home and then added, "Are you okay?" I am not. That unsettled me. I immediately called her. The moment she answered, I expected her to say something. Anything. But there was only silence. No words, no breathing. Just the distant ambience of her home. I messaged her again. No response. I decided to wait until our next visit to the cemetery. At the station, I tried to dig up any information related to the grave Lisa had been assigned to watch. Nothing. So I focused on my usual work, writing reports. By noon, I was out patrolling the streets. The city was soon drenched in heavy rain, reducing visibility to almost nothing. I had to navigate only using silhouettes of buildings. Eventually, I sought shelter in a small building, waiting for the downpour to subside. I informed my team that the storm was delaying my return to the station. The rain was so dense that I could barely see a few yards ahead. I decided to push forward despite the conditions. As I moved through the misty streets, a silhouette of a woman appeared in the distance. At first, I thought it was just another pedestrian, but as I got closer, her face remained obscured. No matter how near I got, she remained a dark figure against the fog. Dumbfounded, I questioned whether I was hallucinating, or if the mist was so thick that even nearby people became invisible. As I pondered, the fog began to lift, and I turned my gaze back to where she walked. I froze. I was no longer on the street. I was back at the cemetery, at the same tomb, Alice's tomb. The lightning-struck tree stood there. I was there. I stumbled back, staring at the grave. It looked the same, unchanged, undisturbed, yet how had I ended up here? But I had no time to dwell on that. I had a duty to return to my patrol. Checking my watch, I felt a cold wave of unease wash over me. 12:50 p.m. I had been waiting out in the rain for what felt like 20 minutes, but nearly an hour had passed. I ran back to the station, my mind racing with questions. How did I end up at the graveyard? When my shift ended at 5, Lisa asked me to meet her at the same cafe across the cemetery. As I sipped my coffee, I watched mourners entering and leaving the graveyard. Then I noticed a homeless-looking person enter, and that was the last thing I remembered before Lisa tapped my shoulder. I asked her about the message she had sent earlier, the one where she said she wasn't okay, but she denied ever sending it. In fact, she claimed she never even received my message. I showed her my phone, she showed me hers. The last message between us was from yesterday. She swore she hadn't deleted anything. I checked the number, it was the right one. Either there had been a system glitch or something else was going on. The latter seemed unlikely, or was it? Night fell, and we entered the cemetery once again, making our way to Alice's grave. Lisa pulled out her phone, searching for any information on Alice. I stared at the grave, then at the door embedded within it. The doorknob was still there. The tomb stood tall and imposing. As I gazed at it, I felt myself growing drowsy. I fought to keep my eyes open, and when I refocused, I saw something. A person approaching from the far end of the cemetery. The woman in white. I stood and told Lisa to stay put as I followed her. She had been lingering here for too long. As soon as she noticed me, she turned and walked away, then quickened her pace. She was running. Instincts kicked in. Either she was planning to spend the night among the graves, or she was hiding something. Either way, she needed to be stopped. But the moment I pursued her, I realized something. She was fast. Inhumanely fast. I lost her. No, it was worse than that. The cemetery was small, yet she had completely disappeared, as if she had never been there at all. Frustrated, I turned back. Lisa was gone. Not in the watching area. No notes, no trace. I called her name, scanning the darkness, until I saw it. The door in the grave was open. A pit formed in my stomach. If she had gone inside, I had to follow. A rotten stench flooded out as I stepped forward. Something dead was down there. I descended into the darkness. What I found made me freeze. A vast chamber filled with skeleton, mutilated corpses, bottles of strange, unidentifiable liquids. And in the center, an altar. Lisa lay upon it. Her throat had been slit. I rushed to her in panic, only for something wet to drip onto my face. I looked up. A crimson drop fell onto Lisa's body. Then another, and another. It was raining blood. Inside, with no open ceiling. Lisa's body was drenched in it, so was I. I screamed. I fled. I didn't stop running until I reached my home, collapsing onto the floor. Everything faded to black. I awoke to a phone call. My colleague informed me that the grave had been raided, and a body was found inside. Lisa's body. I was immediately under suspicion. My role as a policeman was suspended until further investigation. Weeks passed. The case remained unsolved. Lisa's death was not a suicide. At her funeral, she was buried in the same cemetery where she had died. Afterward, I stopped by the cafe. As I left, I noticed a plaque on the wall. It read, "In the year 1600, This site was the cottage of a witch named Alice. Born in 1570, she lived until 1699, when the townspeople burned her at the stake, at the very location of the city cemetery. In 1933, a man named Charles Grover was found dead in the same spot where she perished. As I read, realization struck me that it might not have been the city council that lured Lisa to the grave. I don't know if y'all ever heard of jug fishing, but it's a pretty common method down here in the South. You can usually land a good amount of catfish in a relatively short time. Ain't the most sportsmanlike way to fish, but it puts food on the table for families like mine. Well, tonight we decided we needed to restock the deep freezer, so we loaded up the kayaks and headed down to one of the local rivers. I'm not giving out the name because, frankly, regardless of the stuff we saw tonight, we ain't giving up our fishing hole. The night started off weird. We always pull in right off the road, paddle down to our usual spot, and set the jugs out with glow sticks. Then we just sit back and enjoy the night till we see the bottles bobbing, the little glow sticks dancing out in the water. But tonight, it got quiet. Not just a night setting in kind of quiet. It was like the whole world pressed pause, and no crickets, no frogs, no owls. Not even the occasional bark from a distant dog. It wasn't just the absence of noise, it felt like everything in a 3-mile radius had just turned towards us, listening. The silence was alive, it pressed against my skull, made my ears ring, like the air itself had sucked in a breath and was holding it. And then, just like that, everything went back to normal, like it hadn't happened. But we felt it. A few hours passed and we'd already had a couple of good chases. My brother and I had backed our kayaks against the bank and were talking about our new jobs. He'd just started a warehouse gig and had picked up a pest control route when he felt something wet hit his neck. Rain, we figured. Made sense with the clouds hanging low. Then a jug dunked under. I paddled over expecting another catfish, but it wasn't. It was a gar, with that wide, toothy grin. Ugly bastard had swallowed the hook and shredded his gills thrashing against the kayak. Blood spilled all over me and the boat. I could smell the iron, thick and hot. It mixed with something else, something rotten, like old meat left in a wet sock. We tried to save the hook but gave up. Tossed it in the cooler. Meat's meat. No point wasting what Mother Nature offers, even if it comes in the shape of a prehistoric nightmare. We paddled over to the side to rest up. That's when we saw it. Or more accurately, we saw its silhouette. It squatted down, knees bent wrong, arms stretched out, long knuckle limbs that reached the ground even while bent. The thing looked like a naked fleshy orangutan, but all wrong. Its limbs were too long, its movements too fluid, like it didn't have bones, just folds and hinges and too many joints. Its skin just didn't look like flesh. It moved, like something underneath was crawling, twisting, writhing just under the surface. We never saw its face, just the suggestion of a head that didn't seem shaped right. We flicked our headlamps on, and in that instant it snapped back into the woods, not running, but shoving itself backwards on those arms. It moved like it was used to being upside down. Then it let out a sound, a scream. Not just a cry or a howl, but something ancient. It started high, like wind shrieking through a broken throat, then dropped into a deep rattling groan that echoed inside my bones. It was the kind of sound that doesn't just scare you. It reminds your body that it's prey. Every instinct in me flinched. I think even the trees did. Then our lights died. Just gone. No flicker, no warning. We were plunged into black. The only light came from the moon overhead and the soft glow of our jug lights bobbing out of the water. Without saying a word, we started pulling in our lines and prepping to head back, but we kept glancing to the woods, and that's when we noticed the shapes. Several of them. Squatting, crawling, hanging from limbs like skeletal puppets, watching us. How long had they been there? How many were out there? And what if that rain my brother felt hadn't been rain at all? What if one of them had been right above us? We pushed off into the middle of the river, paddling in silence. That kind of silence that lets you hear your blood moving, your own joints cracking. Every breath felt loud, every blink a betrayal. Then they started mimicking us. At first it was quiet. From the woods behind us we heard laugh. My laugh. But not me. Not then. It was distorted, stretched, like someone trying to remember how a person sounds. Then my brother's voice, slurred and out of sync.
Hell yeah, man. That's a good one.
He'd said that earlier, when we caught the first catfish. Then more of our voices came, played back in layers. Some overlapping, some too slow. Others sped up into mockeries. Twisted echoes of our conversation from earlier. Every joke, every story, every laugh played back like a funhouse mirror trying to imitate a memory. We sat frozen in our kayaks, drifting. Because what the hell do you do when the forest is mocking you? When something in the dark wants you to know it's been listening? I think we're trapped here. There's only a 5-foot gap to get back through the flooded brush to the truck. One narrow passage, and they're waiting for us to try. Maybe they'll vanish at dawn, or maybe they won't. Maybe they'll just keep watching, mimicking, crawling closer, one distorted giggle at a time, until we're either mad enough to paddle into their arms or too tired to care. Either way, I guess we'll know come morning. Pretty much what the title says. Firstly, let me make this clear. I am not a vampire. That term is so overused, and I do not wish to be associated with it. I guess I'll start with how this habit began. See, I used to intern at a hospital. I aspired to be a surgeon, and quite often I'd be right there in the room with the professionals, watching them operate and learning the methods. I'm not sure where exactly I began to develop this lust, but I do know it began with the blood bags. I'd be intently paying attention to the surgeon's procedures, taking notes with my eyes fixated on their careful hands and precise incisions, the way the blood rose to the surface of their skin, pooling slightly before being cleaned away. I couldn't help but notice it. It gleamed under the surgical lamp, creating this brilliant sparkle that twinkled and danced. Instances such as these, the ones where I'd find the abstract beauty in the very thing that kept our bodies operational. Our own substance, our own holy liquid. That made me curious, very curious. I'd think to myself about how miraculous it was, how incredibly fascinating the human body was. After a number of these sessions, my curiosity grew to abnormal proportions. I couldn't stop thinking about how precious the blood was, how we're created with just the perfect amount to keep us alive. Lose too much, you die. Take in too much, you die. As I said, this all started with the blood bags. During my time spent in the hospital, I managed to sneak out a few of them, as well as some needles and collection tubes. Over the course of about a week, I'd say I had successfully obtained the things I needed and created my own in-home setup. In my curiosity, I began taking my own blood. I'd cook myself a full-course meal beforehand, including lots of red meat, water, spinach, fish, and eggs, all things to help my body replenish after losing blood. Once that was completed, I'd set myself up, stick the needle in, and wait for the bag to fill. Everything was clean. I'm not a moron. I knew what could come of having unsterile equipment. Come on. Plus, I'd limit myself to only doing this for once every 72 hours. After about 7 sessions or so, I'd gathered myself quite the collection of blood bags that I kept in my meat freezer. I'd go to the hospital as normal every time, and I'd look just as put together as anyone else in the facility. However, I began to slip into my addiction. I started stealing more and more bags, robbing the hospital of more and more equipment. One day I was called into the director's office. She told me she knew I'd been stealing and showed video evidence of me sneaking away 2 handfuls of syringes. I was asked to leave. Of course, being an intern and all, so I did. I went home devastated. I couldn't believe that I had been so stupid, so careless. I couldn't bring myself to look at my in-home setup when I walked through the door. I simply waltzed past it before plopping down at the dining room table and cracking open a beer. Then 2, and then 6. At my 8th beer, my judgment was incredibly clouded. I opened the meat freezer and began analyzing the collection I had built. Life's most precious liquid, huh? I thought to myself, cracking open another can. That's where humanity's got it wrong. This is life's most precious liquid. I grabbed one of those bags and felt it in my hand. It was so much lighter than I'd remembered. How about a toast? I asked aloud. To my blood. I stumbled to the microwave before popping the bag in for 45 seconds. I waited, swaying back and forth for the beep to come, ringing out from the machine. Once I did, I opened the microwave and the entire kitchen was flooded with a scent of copper. Hooray for science, am I right, fellas? I asked no one. Using a steak knife, I tore the plastic and poured the crimson liquid into a glass. Steam rose from the cup and the aroma punctured my nostrils. Hesitant at first, I took a small sip, then a gulp. Then before I knew it, I was chugging the stuff. My head cocked back 90 degrees as to get the last drop from the cup before I sat down gently on the counter. No nausea, no headaches, just stillness. My feet were planted firmly on the ground and my face was no longer burning hot and red. I felt whole. I woke up the next morning with no hangover nor lack of memory. I knew exactly what I'd done, and I wanted to do it more. This became the new ritual, and every night after returning home from my new fast food job, this was the one thing that kept me positive. The one thing that made me feel normal and welcomed. Something that didn't belong to anyone but myself, and I took solace in it. I wouldn't say I seriously can't stop, but I will say it would be like a spike to the heart. This is the closest I've ever felt with myself, and the last thing I want to do is ruin that. I never believed in ghosts, God, or demons until last night. I've always been a skeptic. No religion, no afterlife, no ghosts. Just the physical world and the stories people tell to make sense of it. I used to roll my eyes at haunted house stories. I'd laugh when people talked about angels or demonic possessions. It was all nonsense to me. Until last night. Now I'm sitting in a gas station parking lot shivering violently despite the humid air, staring at my hands like they're not mine anymore. The skin feels too tight, the bones too brittle. Something followed me home last night. I don't think it came from this world, and I don't think I'm going to survive tonight. Let me explain. I live alone in a small rural house just outside of town. No roommates. No nearby neighbors, just trees and silence. A silence that used to be comforting, but now feels like a held breath. Yesterday, I got home around 8 p.m. I'd been running errands and was dead tired. It had just started to rain, a cold, misty drizzle, enough to make the woods look hazy, like a living shadow through the headlights. As I pulled into the driveway, my car headlights hit something standing at the edge of the tree line. I thought it was a deer at first, 2 pale, round shapes reflecting the light. But deer don't stand upright. I froze, my foot hovering over the brake pedal. The figure didn't move, didn't react, just watched. It was impossibly tall, unnaturally thin, and even from 30 feet away, I could tell something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. The shape of its head wasn't right, too long, like a stretched skull, and its arms hung too low, the fingertips dragging the wet ground. I blinked, and it was gone. Like literally gone. No sound of running, no movement of leaves, no shadow of a thing disappearing into the trees. Just vanished. 1 second it was there, the next it wasn't. I sat in my car for a long time, the engine ticking, the headlights slicing through the rain. I told myself I was just tired, a trick of the light, a hallucination. That's what I told myself, until I saw the footprints, leading up from the woods, up my driveway, to my front door. Bare footprints, long toes deep in the mud, as if something heavy had walked through barefoot. Slowly, they stopped at my welcome mat, and there were no prints going back. I stood on my porch staring at my door. I don't know why, but I knocked before opening it. A pathetic, hollow sound. I laughed at myself. What the hell are you doing? But when I stepped inside, every light in the house was on. Not just on, they were a blinding, harsh white. Every bulb, every lamp. The sudden brightness felt like a physical violation. That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound felt amplified, like the world had been turned up to 11. The wind groaning through the trees, the ticking clock, the creak of the old floorboards. But worst of all, the house itself seemed to be breathing, a low, constant hum, like a distant whisper. Around 2:30 a.m., the hallway light turned off by itself, just clicked off. The house went from a false brightness to a consuming absolute darkness. I got up to check the switch. It was flipped on. That's when I heard it. Breathing. Slow, wet breathing. A rasping, gurgling sound coming from my bedroom closet. It was too loud to be human. It sounded like something trying to breathe through a throat full of water and gravel. I froze. My body knew before my brain did. Something was in there with me. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and yanked the closet door open. Nothing. No one. Just my old coats, some boxes, and a silence so profound it felt like a weight on my chest. I didn't sleep. This morning, I noticed something carved into my bedroom wall. It hadn't been there yesterday, I swear on my life. It looked like 3 long symbols, like crosses but twisted and elongated. The lines jagged and raw. They were burned into the dry wall, deep as if gorged with something hot. The smell of scorched plaster still hung in the air. And then my nose started bleeding. Just out of nowhere, a sudden gush of warm liquid. It hasn't stopped for more than an hour. Every time I wipe it, it starts again. I've gone through half a roll of paper towels. The blood feels thick, almost oily. I came out to the gas station for a break, just to get away. But even now, in a lit parking lot surrounded by people, I don't feel alone. I can feel it watching me. But it's more than that. Something is inside me. Not metaphorically, I mean literally. I feel like there's something under my skin. Like it's a parasite moving and twisting just below the surface. I can feel a cold pressure behind my eyes and a strange deep ache in my bones. It's wearing me, like a coat it hasn't zipped up yet, and I'm just the lining. And here's the thing that broke me. The reason I wrote this, while I was in the bathroom here at the station, I looked in the mirror and my reflection didn't move. I turned my head to the right. It stayed still. I raised my hand. It stayed perfectly still, hanging at its side. Then, after a long, terrifying second, its mouth stretched into a wide, unnatural smile. A smile that didn't reach its eyes, which were black just for an instant. I didn't smile. It smiled at me like it knew a terrible secret. Then it mouthed 2 words, its lips forming the shape slowly, deliberately. "He's coming." I never believed in ghosts, or God, or demons, but I believe now, because I think I brought one home with me, and it doesn't want to leave. If anyone's ever seen anything like this before, please tell me what to do. My nose is still bleeding. The blood smells like rust and burning paper. I think I'm running out of time. It's inside me. I'm sure of it now. Time feels like it's peeling away in layers, same as skin after a burn. Soft, pink, and raw underneath. I left the gas station 10 minutes ago, or maybe 20. I don't know why. The gas station, well lit and busy, was safe, or at least felt safe. My plan was to drive to the ER, but something pulled me back to that house, like a barbed hook buried behind my sternum, tugging me back to where it all started. My hands gripped the wheel as I drove, but they didn't feel like my hands anymore. They didn't feel like hands. The knuckles had gone loose, like they'd been boiled. The bones beneath flexed wrong, delayed, as if they were remembering the motion after I made it. The skin is shifting, looser in some places, too tight in others. A creature molting from the inside out. I scratched an itch on my forearm and felt something coiling beneath the surface, tight and slick. Something twitched within my fingers. Not muscle, not blood, something else, something aware. Fear consumed me. I pulled over. I'm sitting in the backseat now. I don't remember climbing back here. My nosebleed stopped, but now there's something worse. There's something in the back of my throat. I can taste it. Metallic and acrid. Blood curdled with smoke. When I breathe, I smell earth, but not dirt. Grave earth. The smell of the inside of a coffin cracked open after too many years. Wet wood and ancient rot and something trying to scream without lungs. I coughed hard, and something came up. It wasn't blood, it wasn't bile. It was black, syrup thick and tar slick. It hit the upholstery with a wet smack and started moving, twitching, bubbling, trying to return. I must be hallucinating. I have to be hallucinating. I leaned out of the door and vomited. More of it came up, ropes of black mucus, stringy and fibrous, writhing like worms in heat. Upon contact with the ground, the pavement sizzled, the concrete pitted. I can feel it growing, pulsing every time I try to speak like it's waiting for a voice to borrow, to steal. My tongue doesn't sit right in my mouth. It's too thick, too dry. It tastes of ashes and dirt, charcoal and rust, and a strange, sweet rot. I dropped to my knees as a pressure built beneath my ribs. At first, I thought I was going to throw up again. I tried to gag, to force something out, but nothing came. Just a rising tide of something cold and wrong curling through my guts, like thick, slick coils of intestine unraveling in reverse. I think I screamed. I don't remember the sound. I remember my voice cracking. I remember my reflection in the side of the mirror. It didn't move. Again, the eyes were vast and full of something that didn't belong in any human skull. Something old. Older than bone, older than language, something that remembers being worshipped. But the worst part, the truly unspeakable part, is that I'm starting to hear its voice. Not with my ears, it's inside my thoughts, curdling them, wrapping itself around my memoirs, a spider spinning silk around prey. whispering in a language I don't understand but feel in my bones, as though it belongs there. It's not just inside me. It's replacing me. The rest of the drive was a blur. I don't remember getting behind the wheel again. I think I blacked out for part of it. I only remember the moment I turned onto my road, how the trees leaned in, as though they'd been waiting, whispering something wet and slow between their branches. The house was dark when I pulled up, not just unlit, dark. A black so deep you feel it in your soul. The porch light was shattered. The windows looked melted, warped, as if the glass had tried to pull away from whatever was inside. Still, I went in. I don't remember unlocking the door. I don't remember even touching it. I just went. I was just inside. The air hit me. A lungful of sickly rot, thick and wet, analogous to breathing through gauze soaked in meat. The lights wouldn't turn on. My phone flickered uselessly in my hand, the screen dimming, pulsing, then dying completely. The symbols on the wall had spread. They were everywhere now, carved deep into the wood of the floorboards, into the walls, and the windows. They bled, thick, slow rivulets of something that looked like blood but smelled of old metal and swamp decay. I stepped in one barefoot and it clung to my skin, soaking in, warm and buzzing with static. I made it to the bathroom before the screaming started. Not mine. Something else. I stumbled back and slammed into the hallway mirror. That's when I saw it again. My reflection, but this time it wasn't delayed. It wasn't off. It was ahead of me, moving first, tilting its head before I did, smiling before I screamed. It raised a hand and pointed not at me, but into me, as if it could see through me, as if it saw something else in there. My limbs felt borrowed, the tendons tugged at the wrong angles, pulled by invisible threads like a marionette handled by something that had only read about humans. This isn't a haunting. This is a metamorphosis. I'm being hollowed out, bit by bit, soul first. It's not wearing me, it's building itself inside me, growing, learning how to be me. My reflection is talking more now. It mimics my voice perfectly. It tells me things I don't want to hear, and it smiles while it does, with that waxy, too wide mouth. It says,
"You were empty long before we came. You invited us."
I'm not writing this to warn you. It's too late for that. I'm writing this because I need to remember what it felt like to be human, because soon I won't. Soon something else will wear this skin, and it will smile, walk, and speak with my voice, and it wants more. I think that's why the reflection smiles, because it knows the ending already, because it knows
You're next.
it already knows your name.
Yeah, you.
That feeling behind your eyes right now, the subtle pull, the itch you can't
Quite scratch.
that soft pressure in your teeth.
It's already started.
You let it in by listening.
By believing.
This thing doesn't need doors.
It doesn't need rituals.
It's a disease, a worm in the fruit of your mind, dormant until you
You look too close.
So go ahead,
Look in the mirror tonight.
just a glance. And if your reflection hesitates for even a second, if it tilts its head a moment,
Too late. Run. But it won't matter. You've already been marked. You've already started to hollow.